to start, anytime I'm talking about pregnancy ministry, I like to start with visual things because I'm a very visual person. When I was doula in Texas, I had a friend who delivered her baby in England. And in England, they have a person who's called a home health aide. So after you have your baby, the home health aide comes to your house to see how you're doing. So the home health aide walks through the door and she's holding her new baby and her husband is there. And she said, okay, Tracy, how are you doing? And she said, oh, I'm fine. And she said, okay. She looked over at the husband. She's like, can you go put the kettle on and make us some tea, please? And she sat down on the couch. And I can't do it on these small chairs, but she sat crisscross on the couch across from Tracy. And she said, now I want you to tell me how you're really doing. And Tracy just bawled. She was like, I'm so overwhelmed and I'm so tired and blah, blah, blah. And the reason I like that visual is because that's what pregnancy ministry is it's trying to push through this thing where we have to be okay. And we're just like, I'm fine. I've got it under control. I'm super mom, I'm super woman, whatever it is. And just sitting down with them and saying, now tell me how you really are. Okay. So that's going to be a lot of what we're going to be learning about today on like how to do that effectively. So when about 3 years ago, God was telling me that he wanted me to write a book, and he was not telling me what the book was going to be about. So that was very complicated. And that's how God does it a lot of times. You know, he told Abraham, I want you to go that way, and I'll tell you where you're going when you're a little bit closer. So that's what he did with me. And so I started like making notes, and I don't know, I think I went through 3 versions before I finally was like, oh, the book's supposed to be about our identity. And as I was working through that, my mom was battling cancer, and a month before she passed away, my dad had a stroke. And so for the last month of my mom's life, I was in the hospital, back and forth with him. I was helping my mom with hospice care, and my life just exploded on January 22nd. And I remember I was helping my dad take some of his first few steps after his stroke, and my mom was in so much pain from her breast cancer, she was curled up in a wheelchair not far from us. And I was standing there and I thought, right now, I don't even know where my kids are. I know someone has them, but I don't know where they are. I have not seen my husband in a couple of days. My home is a mess. I had to cancel my doula clients who were due that month. I couldn't be at any of their births. And I wasn't able to go to church. I was at every Sunday for a month. I was in the hospital with my dad. And I was like, I've lost all of my identity. I'm not anybody who I normally was. When people would be like, who are you? I'd be like, oh, I'm a doula, or I'm a mom, or I'm a daughter, I'm a wife. And I lost all of those things. And all I was at that moment, helping my dad walk down the hallway. That's all I was. We were coping through that moment. We'd get to the next moment. And I remember thinking that, you know, if I didn't have God in my life right now, like I also wasn't reading my Bible, wasn't doing my quiet time in the morning with my cup of coffee and my journal, I was relying fully on what I remembered. Hymns were popping into my mind, Bible verses I had memorized were popping to my mind, and that's who we are. We're daughters of God. And if we don't do that prep work before we're in a season like that, that season will run us over. But when we do that prep work, then we have that. And I think one of the scariest things about a lot of the people that we help in our ministries is they don't have that. And even if they do, they don't have it very deeply rooted in their lives. And so we're having to do some of that prep work for them. We do that work in advance so that when they're not ready, we're ready to sit in it with them and be with them. So that's why I love this ministry. And during that time, I was so loved on by people at our church and our community. I didn't fix dinner for a month and my family was well fed. And that is just an amazing thing. And when we help people going through grief, we help them survive. And I'm the person I am today because of help that people gave me during that season. And doing stuff like this helps heal me every single time because that journey made this. When I was raised as a missionary kid in Kenya, Africa, so that's East Africa. And when I was about 16 years old, me and my brother were waiting on the side of the road for a bus to go to the movies. We were going to see X-Men Wolverine. which we didn't end up enjoying watching. We were standing there waiting on the side of the road, and two men walked up, and we were alone on the side of the road besides these two men, and they had a gun. And they told us, if you want peace, give us your money. And so we pulled out what money we had. They took our cell phones. They were very nice and gave the SIM cards back from our phones so we didn't lose our contact. It's a weird thing, I think, but we were grateful. And we were standing on the side of the road, and they had just robbed us, and they looked at us and they pointed where we were standing. It went down like this steep hill with lots of bushes and underbrush and trees, and they pointed down a pathway, and they said, okay, now we want you to go down here. And I was like, this is it. This is how I'm gonna die. So I'm gonna be murdered or whatever. And my brother, who's 2 years younger than me, said, please, we've given you our money, we've given you our phones, please just let us go in peace. And thank God, a group of people was starting to collect further down the hill. They could tell what was happening, and they were talking with each other, and there was more were joining them. And so the men became afraid that they would turn into a mob and like stop them from what they were doing. So they just left us alone. And we walked back into our home, told our parents that we had just been robbed. And a friend heard what had happened and said, here, I'll take you to the movies in my car. Let's go. So we went and watched the movie. Didn't like the movie, unfortunately, but we still got to go. That was something where it was my first introduction to like a real, genuine trauma. And what happened over the course of the next couple of weeks was everybody was so proud of us. And everybody was, oh, you're handling this so well. I'm a firstborn daughter. Any other firstborn daughters in the room? Now, what does your brain do when people say you're handling it so well? I'm going to handle it even weller. Like, I've got this. And so, especially at a young age, I was like, I wrote a blog about my experience, and I would tell people like, oh, this is this amazing thing that happened. Now, fast forward, I actually went to college here in North Carolina at Surrey Community College. And when I would drive to school, I would have an anxiety attack from the time I left the house where I was staying till I got to school. I was afraid I was going to get lost. I was afraid something awful was going to happen to me. Now, has anybody around in this group broken down on the side of the road in this area? Is it a scary thing? There are nice country, God-fearing folks on every corner. You would find someone who would help you. And truthfully, if you sit in your side of the road with your car for too long, a guy with a truck's going to pull over and say, honey, do you need any help? So I didn't really understand what was going on at the time. Fast forward to earlier this year, I was actually receiving a training through our mission organization. Safety is a very important thing to them. And I was sitting about where you were sitting. What's your name?
Katie.
Katie, please do not quiz me later. Katie. I was sitting about where you were sitting, and the teacher was talking about being situationally aware. He's like, now if you're walking down a market street and you see someone cutting vegetables with a knife, I don't think you need to panic. Be aware there's a weapon in your vicinity, but don't panic. Now if you see someone with a knife and he like walked towards me like this, my heart dropped onto the floor, and I started shaking, and my breathing started accelerating, and I was like, why am I scared of this? Like, he's a teacher, he's not gonna cut me with a knife. And then I realized that I was still, to this day, and I'm 34 years old, carrying some of that fear because I never laid it down because I was doing so well. And so this can be extremely hard, especially when you don't have the tools to be sitting there realizing this is not a reasonable time to be afraid. I've just got some stuff going on. And that's one of the things that trauma does. Trauma does three things when you're experiencing the event of the trauma and when you're moving forward. So it starts by hijacking, and it really, when we're going through our lives and we're going day to day, we have a certain way our brain is supposed to operate. Lion comes at me, I get scared. Just do a normal thing like sitting at a table, I don't get scared. But when we go through a trauma, our brains get hijacked to some degree. It also steals, because in the moment where, like when I was standing on that street corner, I was not supposed to be being robbed. I was supposed to be having a great time with my brother and going to the movies. So that moment was forever taken away from me, right? I can never go back and get that moment back. So it hijacks the way our brains are supposed to operate, and then it steals whatever moment the event happened in. And then it also twists. So for me, the twisting was that I did such a good job and I'm such a good trauma survivor. And for other people, it can be it's your fault that happened to you. You should have been in a different place, so different people in different situations, it gets twisted different ways. It also, how it gets twisted depends on the frequency of your trauma. I mean, we've got people, kids in the foster care system oftentimes go through trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma. Each time their brain is going to be twisted. Their normal way of functioning is going to be hijacked, and that moments after moments after moments are stolen. And so when you have a person who's been through zero trauma approaching a situation versus a person who's had multiple traumas approaching a situation, and combine the fact that they're two different individuals anyway, there just can be a myriad of different ways that this can impact you, different ways you can process it. Now, real quick, before I forget, there's a stack of client profiles in front of you. I would really like for you guys to kind of flip through and grab one that just is grabbing your attention. These are not real women, these are made up women, except for one. One of these women, it is 100% a true story. But her name has been changed, her identity is kept safe. But all the others are just different details that I've collected from other stories. Heather also helped give me some ideas from stories she's experienced. So all of these women could be real women. These aren't crazy out of the box stories. These are potentially real situations. Now, years ago, have you guys heard the phrase like, oh, you need to process what happened to you? Yeah. Has anybody ever received steps to how to process something? No. We have so many buzzwords in our society of like things that we say that we don't really know what they mean. And so I got tired of that. So I created some steps for processing. This is not, this is just me. This is Abbey. This is what I find helpful and what I have found helpful working through other people with. So the first step is, and you can see is use the helpful acronym PAIN, because that's the reason we need to process is because it hurt. We don't need to process happy, joyful, amazing things. We need to process things that hurt. So the first step is you need to identify what hurt, like what was painful about that situation. So when I look back and think to myself, what was hard about that traumatic event that, I was in. Now, if you'd asked me 10, 15 years ago, I would have said, oh, it's the fear. That was the painful part, of being afraid of what was going to happen. But now, after some growth, I realized that actually probably the most painful part of that event was that I was not sent to counseling afterwards. And that could have helped me a lot. And I experienced more pain from the anxiety attacks I had later than I did in the moment. Like when you combine all those anxiety attacks that I didn't understand, that was the more painful part. So processing is something that you can do over and over and over and over again as needed to rediscover like what is still impacting you. You also need to accept what you had some or complete control over. Now, the important part of this one is that this does not mean guilt. Having control over something does not mean that you are responsible for the outcomes of what happens. So for instance, if I wanted to, look back, it's like, well, I had control over whether or not we were standing on the side of the road. I had control over how we communicated with the people who were robbing us, things like that. So whenever you're working through this with someone, be sure that it's not like, well, I shouldn't have been on that street corner and I had control over that and I should have done something different. That's not the point of this. The point is to recognize what we as individuals in general have control over. And truthfully, when you're going through a traumatic event, most of the time, most of the events in the traumatic event, you have no control over. So hopefully it kind of does the opposite to where it shows how little they had control over. Because I didn't make those guys get a gun, I didn't make them on the same street as us, I didn't make them stop us, all these things. I had way more things that I had zero control over. The next you have to identify, this is kind of leading from the accepting part, is identify what was inevitable. What you were like, there's no way you could have known that was going to happen, there's no way you could have stopped it from happening. And this is especially true when we're dealing with people who have been sexually assaulted. Like, it was inevitable most of the time. There was nothing you could have done. And especially when really, even if you were walking down the street naked, there's no excuse for someone doing that to you. So these are things that we have zero control over. Then it's helpful to identify, it's like, okay, so this thing happened to you. What are you gonna do next? Like if I'm standing on the street corner, what can I do next time to be more safe? And again, being very careful to avoid, like, don't make that tie of guilt. Don't make that tie of like, well, if I had done that last time. So, maybe I could have been more situationally aware. Maybe they were acting suspicious at the bottom of the hill for all I know. Now, the balance with this one too is creating reasonable next steps. Okay, if my answer to this is like, well, I'll just never be on the street ever again. Well, that's probably not healthy. Most of the time streets are safe. So you really have to be careful that it's within you're still behaving like a normal human being. You're still going out, you're still experiencing things. And then that leads to, identifying the enemy. And sometimes the enemy is a person. In my story, those men with the guns were the enemy. It was their fault. They carried the responsibility of doing the right thing. I was an innocent person just standing there. Sometimes the enemy is situations, like poverty. Like poverty is an enemy, and it's not a thing that I have control over if I was raised in poverty and I had all these experiences because of my poverty. If we had a time machine, like if I had a time machine and I could go back to that moment and do something different, would I have not gone to the movies at all? Would I have had my parents be standing on the side of the street with us? And again, this is where it's very easy to be like, well, if I had done something different, it wouldn't have happened. And you really have to be careful to avoid that because it's impossible to do that. But sometimes it can be helpful to reframe events to help you be more safe in the future, help you make better choices, and even sometimes help you imagine that it went differently. Imagine it went like it should have gone, and just kind of sit in that moment of like, I went to the movies, we had popcorn and a hot dog, and we had a great time, then we went home. And just get to visit this imaginary thing and just enjoy it in your mind for a minute. God gave us vivid imaginations for a reason. And I would rather a person visit an imaginary memory over and over again and just enjoy that feeling than to visit a traumatic memory over and over and over again and relive that trauma, and it's not going to help anyway. You can't go back and change it, but you can use your imagination and pretend like it went differently. And I'm going to talk more about that later in the session. So I want you guys to look at your client, and I want you to jot down just a couple of things somewhere in your notebook of what are some things that your client had no control over. We're going to take about 5 minutes to do that. Who have recently experienced a traumatic event, specifically within the last 6 hours, if they play Tetris, their risks of experiencing PTSD are significantly lower. They're still trying to figure out, last I checked, they might have figured it out. I haven't looked at it recently, but they're not exactly sure why. I really think that God did design that problem-solving part of our brain on purpose. Like, God doesn't make accidents. Now, we don't always know how to use the brain he gave us, but he did design it with a purpose. And I think that it feels good to figure something out. It feels good to put the boxes neatly, put your ducks in a row, let's say it that way. And so I think that Tetris can kind of scratch that itch a little bit. And when you're experiencing that puzzle piece, I just put that last puzzle piece in. When you have that feeling while also experiencing residual trauma, I think it helps soothe us a little bit. Interestingly enough, when I talked to my brother about our event, he has not carried a lot of the anxiety that I have from it. And I think part of it is that he was able to be the one to say, hey, please let us go. And I think that clicked a part of his brain. He did the manly thing, took care of his sister. He's the one who shut down the situation, and we moved on. And you will never catch me telling that story without saying that my brother was the hero of that story. If I'd been alone, I would have been dragged down a hill, and Lord only knows where I'd be right now. So I think that for him, that was playing Tetris. And a lot of times there's not really things we can fix, and there's not really things we can do, but playing Tetris is a great thing. So if you have access to someone, especially within the last 6 hours after a traumatic event, just for fun, play Tetris. It definitely won't hurt. And I love it when we can do things that won't hurt and might help. So the next thing we're going to do is work on a breathing technique. Who here has heard of this box breathing? A couple of you, that's great. It's really easy to remember. That's what I like. And if you do anything with young kids, everybody knows about, like, filling up your lungs and making it feel like a hot air balloon and holding and then deflating the hot air balloon, stuff like that. But this one's a little bit more complex. Studies really support that really in general, Americans don't breathe right, which is kind of sad because we're not even breathing right. But we hold our breath a lot, especially women, especially because we want our tummies to look nice and flat. And so we tend to walk around like this. And I'm so guilty of that. And it's impacted our pelvic floors, it's impacted our mental health. We're just not getting oxygenated enough. And that can be especially true if you are feeling stress and anxiety. Your body holds tension and then you're not breathing well. And so teaching your clients how to do this breathing technique. And a lot of times, even my daughter struggles with anxiety. She doesn't want to do it with me, but I'm like, okay, go to your room, shut the door, and do it by yourself. Preteens are obnoxious, guys. Why is everything so complicated? So you can be just show them how to do it, and then hopefully when they're behind closed doors, they'll do it on their own. I also find that if you can find it within yourself, I don't know you guys well enough, I don't know how confident or timid you might be, but if you can do it obnoxiously, then you're kind of doing it at this level. And then they'll I'll do it here, So the more kind of over the top we can be, a lot of times that opens people up to be like, well, I'm not being as crazy as Abbey, so I'll just do this little thing and it won't be as awkward. So, so let's just for fun, we're just gonna all do this together. I'm gonna walk you through it. So we start with the inhale and we count to 4 to go across our square, and then we hold our breath to the count of 4, and then we exhale to the count of 4, and then we rest to the count of 4. So we're just going to do all that together. I'm not going to be able to breathe at the same pace, so you guys just do the breathing part. I'm going to do the counting part. So we're going to inhale, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Rest, 2, 3, 4. So it's really easy. One of the things that is interesting is that when we breathe quickly, we're actually exhaling a lot of the oxygen instead of getting it. So that's why we like to hold our breath, so that we're actually holding that oxygen in, letting it get to all of the areas of the lungs before we're exhaling all of that yucky stuff. You can also go through mental exercises, while you're telling them to inhale, you can be think of something positive as you breathe in, think of that negative thing you want to let go. It is really funny and awesome that our brains are so easily tricked because it's awesome in that we have easy tools to help us reframe our mind. And there is a lot of data that shows thinking positively does change your brain chemistry, and thinking negatively changes your brain chemistry. If I wake up every morning and look in the mirror and say, oh, Abby, you just look awful today, you look so fat, you got pimples, your hair's a mess, blah, 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 I'm probably it's going to take time to recover finally thinking that I'm beautiful. Years ago, there was this amazing teenager who did a study on herself, where every day she set up a camera in front of her in the mirror, and she was like, you're beautiful. You look nice today. And you saw her change into this beautiful, confident, amazing person, even though she started out not believing it. And at the end of it, she was like, you look great today, girl, and walking away from the mirror or whatever. So yeah, it's gonna feel like lying at first. It's gonna feel like this is bogus, this is not true, but eventually it does become true. And eventually your brain starts to make those connections. And one of the things that has always amazed me is that when I was a teenager, I was the least confident person in the room, and I'm not exaggerating. I was the person, my hands in my pocket, standing in the corner, staring at the floor. Please don't look at me, and definitely don't talk to me. And that was with parents who always affirmed me. They were always like, Abby, you can be anything you want to be. Abby, you're so beautiful today. And when I think of girls who are raised in situations where they are told negative things, you're worthless, you're never going to become anything, you're ugly, I don't know how those women wake up in the morning and get out of bed, because it's hard enough for us, or for me, I don't know what your home situation like, but for me, being raised positively, and I still have to fight to have a positive self-image, because Satan wants our image. He wants our identity for himself. He doesn't want us to be able to use it for what God has designed us to be used for. So yeah, with young girls who have experienced being talked down to their whole life, which is way more common than I wish it was. We really have to do a lot of work, and they have to be just convinced that lie to yourself, say those positive things over and over again until you believe it. When we experience trauma, everybody holds trauma, grief, anger, anxiety, whatever it is, we hold it in different parts of our body. Some of that is genetics, like just like where we are inclined to hold those things. Some of it is just coincidence. Some of it, coincides with illnesses and different things. My daughter, who struggles with anxiety, it's her stomach. Man, girl, go to a new situation, my stomach hurts. Nervous about going to bed that night for some reason, my stomach hurts. And so that's where her anxiety is held, is in her stomach. Mine is in my chest. I tighten my chest, I hold my breath. Some people it's in their neck, like, they tense up like this. When you have a client who has a chronic issue of some kind, like she says, oh, my back is always hurting, or whatever it might be, I have tension headaches. This can be a potential signal for you to be aware of keeping an eye out for trauma or anxiety or some negative emotion that they're holding on to. Now, what we have to be really careful about is that we're not giving our clients trauma, because it can be easy for us to view something they've been through and say, well, that's a traumatic event right there, but it might not have been for them. When I was a doula, one of my first births, my client had, to this day, it's my least favorite birth I've ever been to. She had a vacuum extraction. She pushed for, I think it was 6 hours, and I can still hear sometimes the screaming that she did when they were pulling that baby out of her body. And I literally, when the baby came out, I like stepped away from the table and I leaned against the wall, and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I need to go to counseling from like watching this woman go through that. So I was prepared. I was like, I'm going to go to that postpartum visit and I'm going to hold this woman, because she's got to be in pieces, and go to the postpartum visit. So tell me what you think about your birth experience. She's like, well, it wasn't what I expected, but my baby's here and I'm doing really well. I'm like enjoying motherhood. And she was doing fine. And I was still struggling. I had a journal about it. And so what was hard for me to watch, and not that it was easy for her to go through, but she wasn't carrying it. She left it on that birthing table and she walked away from it. And if the situation had been flipped, I might have felt the same. Maybe it was more traumatic to watch it than to actually go through it. So you never want to, when you're counseling with someone, like, oh, I'm so sorry you were traumatized by such and such and such and such. Because then they can be like, oh, was that a traumatic event? And then it can kind of become something that they accept and bring onto themselves that they weren't carrying. And we don't want to make our clients carry more than they're already carrying. So there's lots of ways where you can just like, tell me how you feel about that. When you think about your childhood, what thing pops to mind the most? So you can ask these leading questions to where they're filling in the gaps, and they're the ones saying, well, the more I think about it, like, I really don't like that this thing happened to me. And so when you're looking for signs of holding trauma or grief in their bodies, this is not an opportunity to say, oh, you're grieving because this. It's an opportunity to ask questions. And that's always going to be where I'm going to encourage everybody to go, is like, ask questions. Let them be the one that tells their story. She was a teen mom, and unfortunately teen moms have a high risk of delivering their babies early, and she did. Her baby was on life support for a while, and it was determined that there was nothing that could be done. She was born too early, and she was not doing well. And so they could keep trying and putting the baby through things, or they could take the baby off life support and let her go. The mom opted, and mom and the father opted to let their baby go. And I was there. They called me in to be a photographer. A lot of times people going through bereavement think they need a photographer to document, and I think that they do. But most of the time that I've gone to be just a photographer, I've turned into a bereavement doula before I left, because they just don't know what they need. And all they can think is like, well, I want pictures. I want to remember my baby. So I was taking photos of them as they were spending their last moments with their baby. And I will never forget this 16-year-old girl holding her baby. And the baby's eyes, like, she was off the life support, and the baby's eyes were like drooping like this, like drowsy looking. And she said, baby girl, you look so tired. It's okay. You can close your eyes. Knowing that her baby would never open them again when she did. And that kind of strength in a 16-year-old, this girl should be painting her nails and going to concerts. And she was telling her baby that it was okay to die. So the amazing part about doing our work is that we get to be witnesses to that. Like, who wants to go to a football game or go see Europe when you can see that amazing strength that can only come from God? Because, 16-year-olds are not known for being wise. And I think that especially when we're dealing in crisis pregnancy ministry, it's really easy to look at a teen mother and see all that she lacks. But when God chooses a mother for a child, he does it on purpose. This child was destined to be this mother's child, and vice versa. It was not an accident. And I think of all of the women who have struggled with infertility. And please, I really want to be delicate with this. So if you struggle with infertility, please know that your journey is an impossibly hard journey. And it's one that you cannot understand unless you've walked in it. But God has the power to keep people from getting pregnant. He has the power to let them be pregnant. Like we see that in the Bible, right? That God held back fertility and that he offered fertility. Each journey is intentional, even with its grief. And it doesn't mean that we're less of women if we don't get pregnant easily or if we get pregnant too easily, whatever it might be. Everything is intentional and everything can be worked through, and God can make everything beautiful in its time. If God wanted to, he could say that every drug addict, every teenager, that when they went and had sex, they just wouldn't get pregnant. He has that power to do that. And he chooses not to. And I don't understand, because who were adopted through the foster care system, who they were the 10th and the 11th child taken from their mother. And she lost a 12th and a 13th after them. And I don't know what that would do to my heart if 13 times someone said, you can't have your child. I don't know what it would do to me if someone said it one time, So we have to step away from this feeling like this was a mistake, this was an accident. And I don't think anybody in this room feels that way. I like to repeat things that we know is true, because on the hard days, it's easy, and don't feel guilty if this is you, to go like, oh, I wish this wasn't happening to this teenager because of this, or that. I wish this wasn't happening to this baby because it's not fair to this baby that their mother is a drug addict. No life comes to this world without God's permission. And so we can't waste our time trying to figure out what would have been perfect. And that kind of like going back to that processing thing, we want to go get in a time machine and make it not happen. But God will for this life to come. So, and he knows what this child needs. He knows what this mom needs. And sometimes I think that a child can be a great rescue line. And sometimes a mother does get her life straightened up when a child comes, or a father does. But ultimately, it's so easy to want to play God. And I'm saying that to myself, not to you. I'm just like, well, if this had happened, this would all be better. But then you see moms like this that remind you that no, like everything is on purpose. And it's really important to also note that, we do work through with our clients and give them resources, give them counsel, but it is God who's doing the work through us and in them. And it is not like this teenage girl, I know nobody in her life coached her on how to let go of her baby. They weren't like, well, these are the easy steps to do so that you can let go of your baby well. God was doing that work in her.